All right, good afternoon, my friends. It's Lee coming back at you. We're 2 days before a federal election. I thought it'd be a great time to get back on the air and talk to you. 30 degrees in Regina today. How about that? That's not bad at all for mid-September. Gonna wait for some people to get on. A few days ago, I was at the Patrick Moore presentation by Rebel News. They brought him in because Regina City Council, which has not been making a lot of good decisions lately, Regina City Council decided they were going to cancel. Actually, sorry, the administration did. Going to cancel the Patrick Moore part of a broader conference that was going on. And so someone was smart enough to invite him, but then the pressure got to them and they uninvited him. And cancel culture is not a blessing to this land, and Rebel News decided they would bring him back in. Well, what an amazing presentation. And it is just one more example that I have found about why we are having so many problems around here. Uh, we have lies told to us all the time. And you listen to his presentation on the environment, and there's so many things that we're being told that are just not as they are. Times in the past where we had far more carbon dioxide, where we had far greater global warming, and there were even better times than what we have right now. And in fact, he says that all of this carbon that we're putting up in the air is helping reforest the whole Earth. Because, of course, the more parts per million there are of carbon, the more things that grow. Another thing that he talked about was plastics and how plastics are not this great big awful thing for the ocean. He put together a collated picture, time-lapse picture of the German satellites that are taking pictures of the Pacific. The great big Pacific garbage patch is not even visible from space. There are diffuse little bits of garbage that are in there. He showed how there was one tour made by a group of people who were trying to collect all the trash off of the West Coast. It's a whole bunch of fishing lines. That's pretty much what they got. So he says, if we want to do something about this, we make an incentive program for fishing companies to bring in their nets that are torn and they don't just throw them out to the ocean. But he says, a lot of these animals are using these little bits of plastic for their gizzard. It's not that they think it's food and eat it and die. He showed pictures that were out and out doctored by mainstream publications. He says, one of them, he's like, you know what, this is a picture of the ocean after the tsunami 10 years ago that swept everything into the ocean. That's why it looks like that. He says actual deceptive things going on. So that's pretty sick. Uh, so I'm seeing lately that on Sun News, we had, the Sun newspapers, we had this headline of a vote for Bernier is a vote for Trudeau. Now, I would like you to think about this. First of all, the newspaper is not saying a vote for the NDP is a vote for Trudeau. They're not saying a vote for the Greens is a vote for Trudeau. Not saying a vote for the Bloc is a vote for Trudeau. Not that anyone in Toronto can do that. But they're saying a vote for the PPC is a vote for Trudeau. I have news for them. The only vote that's a vote for Trudeau is a vote for Trudeau. Okay, so anyone who's thinking knows this. And it's unfortunate that they're using this kind of ploy 2 days before the election to try to bias against the PPC. Look, we've had this thing in the Conservative Party where they want to get rid of social conservatives. That was happening in the last election. They did not want to see that, and there were some candidates that were sorted out. I talked to one person whose husband was taken out of a nomination race with no explanation the day before. I said, why do you think that was? He said, because he's an evangelical. He says, the Liberal incumbent said, boy, if you win, I don't think I'm going to run. I don't think I could beat you. That's how good of a candidate he was. I know people that were involved with the Leslyn Lewis campaign who told me that Leslyn Lewis was at a gathering of the Toronto Conservatives, and someone said to her, we got to get rid of the social conservatives out of the party. And she said, well, I'm a social conservative. He said, you are? Look, there's these people out there. Aaron O'Toole has done everything to reach out for the East and to alienate the West. I remember when this idea of bringing in a carbon tax that it could bring in Toronto voters. Someone sent me an article, a conservative strategist, floated it to me. I said, I'm kind of sick of Toronto running this country. So I said, you are going to, if you bring this in, there's going to be a backlash. It's going to smack of not having integrity, not to mention being bad policy. So they did it anyway. And look what happened, right? So, if Aaron O'Toole does not win this election, don't blame the PPC. When you do everything to alienate social conservatives and the West, how are they going to vote for you? I mean, if you've got, let's say you're looking for a partner, and someone comes to you and says, hey, I love what you represent, you are welcome. I think some things that you don't, but I believe in what you do, and I would love to have your vote, and you have, or your date or whatever, and another person says, well, we want to distance ourselves from you as much as we can. You can kind of hang out with us, but we don't want it to seem like you're hanging out with us because we want to hang out with the cool kids. No, no. So if Aaron O'Toole doesn't win this election, it is Aaron O'Toole's fault. Don't blame the PPC, okay? And I don't know why anyone is, I mean, the Liberals, some of the things that they're proposing are kind of scary. First of all, any pro-life organization is going to probably lose their charitable status. They've said that straight out. We don't know how far that goes. I mean, some of the things I see people cheering for, I wouldn't be surprised if we had some churches and religious organizations losing their charitable status. So there's something to think about. Did your pastor or clergy tell you that was happening? Oh, okay, probably not. Okay. This is serious. We also, it looks like any kind of politically incorrect speech is not going to be allowed online. I mean, they're calling it hate speech, but we know in our day, truth sounds a lot like hate when it comes to certain issues. And boy, so we can't say that anymore. I mean, we've already seen our Constitution pretty much get treated like a piece of toilet paper by our political leaders who've handed our country over to medical dictators. I mean, this is really, really serious. Recently, I had a post that was comparing the treatment of the unvaccinated to Jews, and I had probably about 90% of people that are like, "Oh my gosh, you're speaking my mind. Thank you, thank you." And then, well, not even, I'd be less than 10% that were offended by the comparison. If you think someone identifying with the Jew is anti-Semitic, I'm telling you, the world just became a much better place. But I did lose a few followers over it. I did lose, the one longtime friend. I just call it in remission. I think it's friendship in remission, but that's fine. Not everyone can walk with us everywhere we're going. Not everyone will stand with us for everything that we are standing for. And if we believe in it, we need to stand for it. We'll get new friends. I remember talking to an army chaplain, and he said, the bond that people have serving together in war is better than, he says, the only thing that compares to it is a long-term marriage. He says, it's the only thing that compares. I just had a comment just come up and then disappear. But someone said they couldn't believe what Canadians were, I don't know, something about this election. Put it back. Whoop! Oh, there we go. You know what's really funny? There it is. It's back. It was just a technical glitch on my part. Thanks, Keith. Yeah, I mean, it's coming. I had someone tell me recently, he says, you know what, my friend in Hungary, he says, a relative, he says, he went through World War II. He says, I tell him what's happening in Canada. He keeps refusing to believe it. He keeps saying, no, it can't be like that. You must be exaggerating. Hey, that can't be true. Because he sees how exactly it was just like in times past, in World War II, where you started to see these things happen in Nazi Germany, and then they went out to everywhere else. So, looks like a duck, quacks like a duck. I mean, what is it, right? So that's what you should be upset about. You should be upset about the totalitarianism of our time that is encroaching. You know, people are like, oh, won't go that far. Really? You know what? How many times have they told us, we'll go this far and no farther? We'll never do this. Sometimes, I mean, with Ford and Kenny, it's taking like a week for them to turn around and actually do the things they never said they would do. So all that happens is the media piles on them, and these medical bureaucrats pile on them, and then they turn around. So here we go. Can you leave this up long enough for me to listen to it? I'd really like to hear what you're saying, but I can't listen to it right now. Well, some people can't listen to what I'm saying at any time, seems. But yes, I'm going to keep this one up for you. Okay, Leanne is with me. Woo! Go Canada. And Doug Davidson, never lose a true friend. Only find out who the real ones were all along. You were right. We will make new ones. Thank you, Doug. Boy, Doug was such a great highlight for me in the last campaign. Thanks again for all you did, Doug. You know, it's funny. I just got some clothes back that I left in Mancota at the campaign. There was an event there that a pastor organized in a local small town hall, and I stayed overnight. I left my suitcase behind. So it has been there for 2 years. And I finally met up with him again. He came out to Moose Jaw. I met him in Moose Jaw. And we had a good chat about everything that's going on. And he told me, this man, he is reading the book of Revelation because he sees it all happening. And this is headed for the mark of the beast at some point, where not only can you not get on a plane, not get on a train, not get in a government building and everyone cheers, it is also you can't buy or sell, right? So implement this in China. I mean, oh, your social credit score. They're just putting in a cryptocurrency in China now where you're not going to be able to do anything. I mean, they can just delete you. You won't be able to do a single transaction. So pretty much after 2,000 years after the prophecy almost, it is coming to pass that, yeah, there's people in this world. They will not be able to buy or sell. And who knows? Could be the whole world. Oh, look at Wendell is sticking with me. Wendell, what a great friend. I don't know. I'll probably lose you yet somehow. I'll have to try harder. I'm just kidding. I know you're laughing over there. Okay. Revelation said this stuff would happen. Yep. Talking about my revelation. All the world tries to put us down. Talking about my revelation. Just because our minds are sound. Gosh, I'm not taking this vax. I mean, I talked to Dr. Hoff. Finally got a hold of him. The one we thought both of his houses burned down. No, it was only one. The fire's only 3 kilometers from his current one. He told me that he has had 14 adverse reaction reports that have happened. Okay? And Wendell's not laughing at that. He's laughing at me. He said he sent them all in. Now, he's been a family doctor in Lytton, BC, before someone got Lytton it up and burned down his practice. He has been a doctor to these people for 28 years. And so he knows their medical history. He knows, what's normal for them, what they've been through before, whatever. He's had 14 people that have had adverse reactions out of a practice of 900. And he says, these are not, he says, I didn't just, your arm's feeling sore for a couple of days, I'm reporting this. He says, these were debilitating conditions that lasted 2 or 3 months later. And so he reported them. Now, he says one of them they sent back and they explained some kind of inflammation issue is something else. But he says most of them, they just didn't reply. They didn't acknowledge them. They didn't accept them. He says when he saw the higher up in BC say, oh, well, we don't know about that. He sent them back by registered mail, right? He says, have they phoned my patients? Have they double checked to see that maybe I misdiagnosed them, I misreported that? No. There are none so blind as those who refuse to see. And that's the problem, is that they don't want to see. Think about how our governments now are doubling down, right? Who at this point can admit that this is a terrible experiment, that this was a wrong solution, that this was worse, that the cure was worse than the disease? Who would admit that now? So they're going to keep doubling down. I really have to wonder, hey, Andrew, I really have to wonder about where this is going to end up, because you're going to have increasing cycles of denial. And there's already indications of that happening. Thomas Renz, who's a lawyer in the States, and find him on BitChute, any interview he's done, he's ready to sue everybody. It's almost hilarious, like he's, if it wasn't so grave. And he's saying that he has an insider, can't remember if it was FDA, NIH, what it was. He says there's 11 different means by which they track what is happening. And the VAERS reports is only one of them, but he says even as of 2 or 3 months ago, there was already 45,000 deaths in the United States on this. So I don't know what they're at now, like 12,000 that they're admitting. What people are finding is now all of these reports are in sequence. And people are going back to the old numbers, and they're like, hey, wait, I submitted it. I saw this one, the doctors. It said this before. Now they're ascribing a different case to this. And some of these are getting, the reinvented ones are getting classified as something else. Oh, medical authorities would never do that. I'm telling you, there are things going on that we cannot believe right now. If you think we're in the days of recent past where we can trust our institutions, we cannot. Not, and our institutions of government are proving it. There's absolutely no difference between what our left-wing governments are doing, what our right-wing governments are doing, except that, well, the right-wing governments do more of an about face when they do what they said they would never do. So we are heading into some kind of political never never land. And again, the people saying a vote for Bernier is a vote for Trudeau, number one, don't know what a vote even is, because only a vote for the Liberals is a vote for the Liberals. And secondly, they're the only ones that are presenting a clear option between, oh, go along with, I mean, we've said for a long time, there's these conservatives that are liberal light, and they're not real conservatives. We just see it in new forms. And I don't know. I mean, I really hope that if the Conservatives won, and Aaron O'Toole would honor what he said, that you would not have to have proof of vaccination to get on a plane or to go into a federal office as an employee or anyone else. But who knows? I mean, look what he said a year ago, that he was this and he was the true blue conservative. And now he gets on the TV and he's something else at the debates. He wants to say that he is an LGBTQ ally that is pro-choice. He's bending over backwards to reach out to the people that are not social conservatives. They are Canadians too. But that's the basis that Bernier relates to them on. He says, I'm not helping you or doing things for you because you're a this, a that, this race, this orientation, this thing, because you are a Canadian. And that's all we ever needed. We have rights for all Canadians. I mean, it is so blatantly simple that if you can't understand it, I mean, you're not thinking. One of the things that I realized in the last election campaign is how people are, it's almost religious, their fidelity to political parties, some of them. Now, the other thing I realize is that the people that do not have any kind of political orientation, haven't really thought through the issues, they can be swayed by all kinds of things. I had one person who was a friend, not very political, said, I'll probably vote for you because it's you, but I saw the debate and I thought Singh was kind of funny, and if I didn't know you, I probably would have voted for him. They're going to vote because for the political leader that was the most funny in a debate. I mean, does this strike you as the way that democracy should function? Probably not. But for some people it does, because the vote of the well-informed person is the same as the vote of the not well-informed person. Sometimes I wonder if when we're pushing for more voter participation for the sake of more voter participation, I mean, it's good to be politically engaged, but maybe some of the idiots that don't know what they're talking about, don't know anything, not that I'm saying that person was, maybe it's just as well that the people that don't really have a strong and clear choice don't make a clear choice. So who knows? My last article I did for the Western Standard was about a Green Party candidate, and his name is Victor Lau. Victor Lau is so interesting. I mean, he's like, I'm upset that Bernier isn't in the debates. He says, my left-wing friends think I'm crazy, but he says, I love ideas, and he should be there. He says, look now, the PPC is probably going to they've got more candidates than us. They're probably going to get more public support than us. Doesn't that count for something? His final quote in the article is like, it's not a democracy. He says, I don't know what the hell you call it. So yeah, I know that debate was so bad. That was one of my Facebook posts. I'm like, just on the gag reflex scale, I mean, this debate was just off the charts. We didn't have barely anything about political accountability for the terrible federal debt that we've incurred in the last 6 years. We had nothing about it until the final 11 minutes. And some of the tone of some of the debate moderators. I mean, I know that some of these politicians would not be friends to us, but there are political leaders on the national stage, and some of the condescension of some of these moderators were just dripping. I mean, it was unbelievable, right? So Wendell's thinking of converting. You made the most important conversion in your life many years ago, but I'll tell you what. With this one, it's kind of like okay, I talked to one political science professor who said, okay, now if we get a party that is just turning its back on the West and this and that and is basically reaching out to Ontario and doesn't build pipelines, doesn't do this, do that, then I think we're back to the 1980s and it's the Reform Party all over again. And I'm thinking, well, if you're honest with that, I can tell you exactly the way this is going to go. You know, people are saying, I hear people say this. They're like, well, look, we had a Reform Party, and and then we had to split into various other parties. So, you know, we've been there, done that. But what they miss is, if it wasn't for that split, if it wasn't for then the reconvergence out of necessity to come together, we never would have had that reform stream within the Conservative Party, because now we are back to the Progressive Conservative Party. And you know, where is it, right? That's why we're splitting again, because you will always get this part that wants to get rid of the other part. There are always going to be two aspects to the conservative movement, and one of them is the social conservatives, and the other is the social libertarian fiscal conservative thing. So, you know, if those people don't recognize that they need the social conservatives, that they need respect for social conservatism, they cannot be strident on these other issues, that actually the welfare state and some of the other values that are on the other side are actually contradictory to conservative values. If they don't recognize that, then it's never going to work. Right? So, all right, Karen, nice to hear from you. You know, I interviewed Karen's sister who lost her husband 3 days after the jab, after the second jab, and you know what? They refused to acknowledge any connection. And again, I don't know what the definition of the unvaccinated is in our Saskatchewan hospitals, in other Canadian hospitals. I know that in the United States, that they've said unless you've had 2 vaccines of the same brand and 2 weeks has passed since the administration of the second one, you were unvaccinated. So this whole thing at the Rough Rider game, oh, we'll vaccinate you at the clinic before the game. Now you can come in. Oh boy. You know, there are some people who've been next to those who received this vaccine who miscarried their kids. There was one girl who had vaginal bleeding and blood clots that were that were sizable, that was being babysat by her grandparents, who had just received the vaccine. There's something in there. We don't know everything that's going on with this, and they've had very little independent views of it. We know that Bill Gates said that there was a proprietary ingredient in there that was not being told. It sure looks like it's graphene oxide now, but they talked also at Johns Hopkins in 2018 about self-replicating vaccines, and so the vaccine itself would get from one person to another. Now, in a normal vaccine, which these shots are not, but in a normal vaccine, there is some shedding. So, you know, you've been inoculated for measles. You're supposedly getting a mild dose of the measles. Someone next to you might get the measles because you've gotten the shot. Now, that I can't tell you how often that happens, but it's a known thing that it can happen. But this is something different. This is something different that we have not seen before. There are things in the blood tests of this that I've seen various times where they're like, we don't even know what this is. We've been looking at blood all our lives. We don't even know what it quite exactly is that we're even looking at here. Yeah, and none of it is very good. So I don't want to get this shot. And they did a chart of the people who, by their education, they polled them, have you or do you intend to get this vaccine? The high school ones were the least, or less than high school. The ones with some college, you know, there was more, and then it went in an arc, and the greatest part of the arc was a master's degree, and then if you had a professional degree such as a doctor or a lawyer, it was more vaccine hesitancy, and then it was the most again at a PhD level. So the PhDs that know they can think for themselves, that know how to do research, they're as hesitant as the high school people. And I think it's because they can think. The other ones think they're educated, and they're maybe not thinking. So the people that are like, oh, how obvious can it be? I mean, why would you hold back now? Da, 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 da. They're not paying any attention to the information that's out there. You know, Dr. Francis Christian talked about this. He says, look, don't outsource your brain. He says, you can look at this stuff. And then you look at how he got treated, how he, as the professor of surgery at the U of S, got dismissed. I mean, this is crazy. How do you do this? And he's talking to them on the phone, and the recording of the conversation is there, right? And all these people care about, from Saskatchewan Health Authority, from the U of S, is, well, we are administering the functions of this HR thing. Oh no, I checked the website today, and it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. He's like, it was just there on the WHO. He said, don't vaccinate. We cannot at this time recommend vaccinating the under 18s. And so then the next day they removed that, and they said something that has the same meaning, but just expressed more lightly. So we can only recommend it for adults. You know, we recommend it for everyone over 18. You know, I've heard that Dr. Shahab is not even a medical doctor. That his PhD is in some kind of psychology. So all these people telling me I'm not a doctor. Well, Dr. Shahab, is he a doctor? Where did he get his medical degree? He's not Dr. Shahab, MD. If I'm wrong, you can put it on here. I'm happy to know the truth. That's what we're trying to get at here, I hope. Premier Mo is not a doctor. Okay, he's a politician. Oh, we've been too patient. We've been very patient with you, maybe too patient. But now it's time to make life very uncomfortable for the unvaccinated. Oh? Well, I haven't been very comfortable the last 18 months seeing where this country's going, seeing that our Constitution is useless, seeing all kinds of things. So if your goal is to make me feel uncomfortable, well, you have succeeded long ago. Thank you, Mr. Premier. I don't know who Larry and Curly is, but I know who Mo is. And he does not impress me much, as Shania Twain would say. So I think that we actually just need to think for ourselves, research for ourselves, get off of all of these big tech platforms that are keeping information from us, which people have pointed out. You know, the Nuremberg trials, the media was not held guiltless. I have been doing my best to get the truth out there, but there were limits that I encountered, and I am not writing for Western Standard anymore because I'm not allowed to write for Western Standard anymore. I had a very sharp conversation following an article that was put on and then yanked by the publisher because there is a lady there that this was about who was getting a double lung transplant. She's terminally ill. She got all of her childhood vaccinations again, but she would not get the COVID vaccine. They said, well, if you don't, you're off the list. Okay. She's had a condition for 2.5 years that is debilitating. As of 2 months ago, her lung function was down to 40%, and it's going to be, you know, where this trajectory is going. When you stop breathing, you stop living. We know that. They would not do this for her. So the Justice Center wrote a letter on her behalf, and True North and Rebel News ran that without any hesitation or anything. So I had the article, then I was asked, you need to get input from a doctor on this because there are issues with immunity with all this. So I'd been trying to get a hold of Dr. Hoff anyway, and boy, the news editor at Western Standard loved Dr. Hoff. It's like anything we could do to get another article about him. Man, the last one was just off the charts. So I thought everybody would be happy if I talked to him. No. Dr. Hoff says this is an experiment. And he says, I refuse to give this vaccine. He says, we need to stop the experiment because it is unethical. And he says, as far as immunosuppressed people, they never tried it on them. He says, by and large, these were tried in the trials on healthy people. You know, these vaccine manufacturers, they don't go after the frail elderly or the pregnant or the whatever. In fact, there's something in the Pfizer things where they're like, if you come into contact with someone pregnant and like, okay, so someone gets the vaccine and they get into contact with someone pregnant, they were to report it, you know, as if anything happened to them. They seem to know that these vaccines could get out, right? Not just the person they were administered to. And what they found was with pregnant people, and this may not have been Pfizer, this might have been Moderna, but there was one of them where in 20% of the first trimester it caused miscarriages, and in the second trimester it was 80% of them that caused miscarriages. The fact that they went out there and said, oh, yeah, pregnant people can take it. Oh, you can mix them. You can do this, that. How many times have they flip-flopped? I mean, is Fauci a fish? That he gets on the shore, blip, 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 2 masks, no mask, 1 mask, and the contradictory advice. There was an experiment that was done, a social experiment, a psychology experiment, where they would put these people in groups. It was kind of like the Truman Show. Only the subject didn't know that it was what it really was, okay? They said, this is the way it worked. You would have lines. There would be like, okay, what line is longer? Okay, and you'd have these simple questions. And you had to have consensus in the group. That was the rule. So they would say, oh, okay, well, it's this one. It was all easy. Everyone's going along. Now, there would be a point, though, where there would be something that was just very clearly not the way that the group was trying to say it was. So, this line is shorter than this line. And everyone's like, oh, yeah, yeah. And then the person who's the subject is like, no, it's not. But almost always they would give in. The group would say it, and they all had to agree, yeah, that line is long. Even though in their heart they're like, I don't really think so. This is how people work, and they know it. So, yeah, this is how it's going, and it's so sad. And so many people have been bludgeoned, coerced. I mean, the fact that our government said, oh, we just need to get to 70%. And Mo was right there in his little thing on Twitter. Let's fill this stadium. Let's da-da-da. Do our part, Saskatchewan, do the right thing. So, okay, 70%. We get past 70%. Oh, no. Some of you won't get it. You are evil. No, we're not. No, we're not. The fact that these people say it's one thing and then later on they say it's another thing, and they show that all of their standards were a bunch of pretense, that's when it's evil. So don't lie to us. If we don't have a choice, if we just, if we do this, just a little bit more, a little more. It's like a man trying to get into a woman's pants when she doesn't want to give it to him. And they just say a bunch of things until finally, they give in. I mean, this is what the governments are doing to us. Yes, the people are getting screwed. Yes, it is immoral. No, you should not have to lose your job over this. Okay? There's one thing that's very strange in this election. I can't think of a time, nor can some of the people that I talk to, where you have the Conservatives and the Union on one side and the Liberals and the NDP on another in a public sector union. But this is what has happened with this whole vaccine mandate for the public sector employees. Because the head of the union said, I will not tolerate any employee being fired or being disciplined because they will not take this vaccine. And the NDP leader is saying, oh, well, it's a last resort. It's not very good, but, well, it's got to be. Of course, Trudeau is the one, it's his idea. So people ask him a question about it. Please get vaccinated. That's his answer. So mantras don't work when it comes to issues of policy and reason. Okay. So there's a lot going on right here. I encourage everyone to vote and to vote their conscience. I see that Chris Sky is saying, don't vote. It's all useless. Okay. I think we do have to acknowledge that we are picking our dictators every 4 years. But when democracy stops having a value in the minds of people, when we stop believing that our public participation makes any difference, is when society breaks down. In political theory, they talk about the consent of the governed, right? Well, we don't have any consent of the governed. The idea in this political philosophy, and Locke talked about it and others, where you invest your power willingly in the sovereign, so the sovereign can do some things for you that you cannot do individually on your own, such as defense, such as policing, such as whatever, right? So we don't have, if we don't believe in our institutions, we don't participate in our institutions, we have no say in our institutions, the whole thing breaks down. And the thing that was the benefit and the beauty of democracy stops taking place. So you can have a benevolent dictator, but power doesn't tend to make people necessarily do the right thing. In fact, it's a real test of virtue. There are some wonderful people that can be entrusted with power and can use it for the benefit of the people and not for their own interests. But I think we have enough examples of nepotism and various things that people will use it to help themselves, and in those that they care about. And I'm not sure that I entirely disagree with that to a certain extent. I mean, I think it's the very nature of people. If someone helps you, you help them. You remember who helped get you where you are, and you know, I think hopefully you don't do that in a way that is unethical, because you know, we're supposed to be doing things as a servant of the people. But again, that's a Christian idea, where Jesus says, "The Lord of the Gentiles lord it over them, but it shall not be that way with you, because whoever wants to become the greatest among you must become a servant of all." And even at the U of R, University of Regina, what's the motto? As one who serves. A lot of our institutions, 12 of the 13 Ivy League schools in the United States, started as Christian institutions. And through their tolerance, these people got in that believed things that were completely different until they took over. I remember hearing years ago, 12 years ago, I think it was, at Harvard, someone was going to give $40 million to the university if they would teach Western values. They refused. Nope, they're not interested in supporting Western civilization. They are interested in the cultural Marxist project of overthrowing Western civilization. So that is where all of these social left movements that the NDP party has drifted to, that is what they're really about. They are about Black Lives Matter. They're about rainbow people. They are about all these other things that traditionally the NDP was about: workers' rights, and that, you know, so workers' rights and socialism purportedly for the benefit of the people. Although as government takes more and more, you have less and less. That was one thing that I couldn't even believe in these debates. Was every question, it seemed, was framed with the assumption of the left-wing position, and then asked, how are you going to fulfill the left-wing position? Well, there's all kinds of ways of looking at these issues. I mean, there was a question from a teacher in the Maritimes somewhere where he says, what are you going to do to make green energy more affordable for everyday people? Well, what are you going to do? I mean, is that the thing we even should be doing? Now, if Bernier was there, he would have told them, but I think, but the only way you can make things more affordable for someone else as a government is to take money, excess money from someone who earned it, and give it to the person so that or subsidize it in some way. And we're not having anything all that different when we have Aaron O'Toole's idea of a carbon tax. I mean, there were some people who said, oh my gosh, this idea might be actually worse than what the Liberals are doing. At least the Liberals tax it and then they do it for what the government has. O'Toole wants to turn this into, oh, it's not a tax, it's a carbon pricing. What O'Toole wants to do is say, we're going to keep track of how much carbon tax you would have paid, and well, really you did, but it will go towards a point system. So what? You're going to get a government mandated bike now? Or what? What's going to be green? So then there's going to be all of these lobbyists trying to get their product to be declared a green product. You know, wow, okay, yeah. And he says, but it'll make people think about what their carbon footprint is. Carbon, did you ever see the first Star Trek movie? The first Star Trek movie, it said, the V'ger or whatever, the lady comes back, she gets taken over by the machine, and now she's the machine. You are the carbon-based unit. You know, and the carbon-based unit is inferior, she says. Yeah, okay, so we are the carbon-based unit. Carbon is the basic building block of life. You know what Patrick Moore said? Patrick Moore said, the day that I left Greenpeace, he says, was when they started talking about banning chlorine. He says, do you know that chlorine has made the best advancement in human health ever? You put it in the water, it kills the cholera. Then all of these like waterborne diseases don't get into people. Why would you ban chlorine? But he says that a philosophy of actually anti-people has crept in. And I think this is really, actually literally demonic. Because Satan hates people. He thinks we're the usurpers of the earth. He remembers a time when the angels were it. And you never had God incarnate into an angel. You had him incarnate into a human being. So he is just jealous because he ain't Ellis. And he hates people. He hates people because God loves people. This is all about getting back at God. So you don't need to be a Christian to know that an anti-human philosophy is not going to be in a human being's interest. And environmentalism has taken a lot of that up. So that is no good. Man, what a great presentation. I am so glad that Rebel Media brought him in. Well, if you've got any questions for me, I've got 20 minutes left, so just put them in the comments and I'll address them as they come. I did want to say I was encouraged last night to see that there weren't many Rider fans in the stands. Now, it's not because I don't like the Riders or don't want to see them do well or want to punish them for their vaccine stance. I was just glad because it meant that a lot of people are not getting this vaccine and will not go to a game on a very nice fall night. Uh, just, they're not going to take the vaccine just to go. And I am really like, I don't know if these vaccine numbers, I mean, I'd like to see these stats they're getting that say it's the unvaccinated they're filling all these places. I mean, we kind of knew beforehand, some of us, that they were going to blame it on us. And in fact, in my post, I said to the friend that, watch, the cases will go up and they'll blame it on us. He's actually the person that unfriended me. So there are some people that it's like Bezmenov talked about. If you ever see his interview with G. Edward Griffin, which is available online, he did it in 1984. He said that there comes a point where, after 3 generations of socialized, communized education, that he says there is no amount of facts or of anything that will convince them again. He says, in his opinion, the only thing that could convince them was if you had 10 to 15 years of communist rule. He says after all the hopes and aspirations that were supposed to happen from it didn't happen, then people would probably start going, I guess this wasn't what we hoped or thought or what it was sold to us as. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to lodge. One of the reasons I think that in some ways there's more freedom in some of these other former Marxist states is that there were people who prayed for generations for their freedom. And eventually those prayers became answered and the door opened in a wonderful way. We had a leader here in Canada where when the rest of the world was spending into oblivion and amounting big debts, we had about 1/3 of as big of a debt, and then we were working to get back to a balanced budget, which we were on pace to when Trudeau took over in 2015. Now we've got the complete opposite of the pendulum. But it can turn back. As bad as things look right now, they can turn back. They can become better. And we could be in a position for a very great breakthrough. I have seen some opinions online where people that say they have sources and whatnot. Who knows? But they say, you know what? Some of the powers that be have gone through different scenarios in their quantum computers, and even the bad guys know that there is an awakening coming. And so they've just decided to take down as many people as they can, make them as sick or dead or whatever, strip them of their finances before this mass awakening happens. You can have awakenings of various kinds. You can have awakenings of spiritual issues, or you could have awakenings of political issues, or both. One of the, people think, as you go back in time, more and more people believed in God, and then science came in, and then we realized there wasn't God and whatever. Except, again, you look deeper at the science and you find out how absolutely flimsy some of their theories are, or even contradictory. I mean, I was in biology in university, and they said, Bio 101, only 1 in 100,000 mutations is helpful. Really? Well, then how do you mutate randomly to a better thing when you've had 99,999 times of damage to yourself and only one that got better? Are you going to have an improved being? No. Do you think people will wake up to the agenda of political control? Some people will, but not a majority. I think the only thing that's going to wake people up is if we have a massive unveiling of the evil. And I think that this coronavirus thing that has been the dominant agenda and driven a lot of the loss of wealth from everyday people to the billionaires, the destruction of small business, the destruction of our freedoms, and the putting of masses in fear, just begging for the government to help them, so that the authorities can benefit from this whole thing that's been created by different power structures. Did it come out of China? Do you think that this did not come out of Wuhan? I mean, come on. From a bat market at a place where they don't even sell those bats, less than a kilometer from the only level 4 biolab in all of China? Like, think about it. Think about it. And it wasn't until Rand Paul pretty much put Fauci on the hot seat that all of a sudden it became an acceptable opinion. And now they're like, it kind of looks like this was an engineered virus because there's little things of HIV in it. Paul Cottrell was telling us this on the alt media very near the beginning, that it had all the bearings of an engineered virus. Oh, anyway, will people wake up? I don't know. You know, part of the answer to that question, Keith, is us. It's what we tell people, and there are some people who can be told things, and there's some people who can't be. But all these people saying, "Oh, be safe." This is a little tagline now. Be safe. They mean well. I don't think it's time to be safe. I think it's time to be bold. I think it's time to take risks, risk for our jobs, risk for our friends, because look, this is for all the beans. The goal is to corral us and to track us and to put in a social credit system like China, followed by a cryptocurrency, followed by the mark of the beast you cannot buy yourself. That's where this is going. Okay, Doug's got a question. Do you think that with this experimental vax rollout that there may be a control group who receive a placebo in a double-blind study? This would produce testaments to the safety of the vax as well. Your thoughts? No. No, they are interested in ramming this down our throats. There are some questions as to the placebo groups in these trials, whether they really got a placebo or not. You know, one of them got Bell's palsy in the placebo in one of the trials, and it was one of the early rounds too, when there wasn't all that many people. So no, I mean, even right now, because this is an experiment that is put on the entire population, I see some people in memes saying, "I'm part of the control group," which, you know, let me not have the vaccine. Or they're being vaxxers. I am actually unvaccinated, but I declare myself an unvaccinated people. Now you must accept my biological vaccine orientation, vaccine identity. So no, I don't think that I mean, there has been some of that at the early rounds of the control group, but it's not going to be a new initiative. They're not interested in anything but illegitimately ramming this down our throats. And for what agenda? I mean, this is where, when you look at Michael Yaden, who used to be the VP for Pfizer himself, if you go to the Planet Lockdown film and listen to him, he says, I lose a lot of people when I come to this conclusion. He says they're with me for everything I'm saying about why there are not independent voices, why this goes against everything in immunology, what they're saying, why, you know, they're with me when I tell them that all these doctors tell me they're afraid for their jobs, but quietly they completely agree with me. He said, but he says, when I get to the end and I start saying, well, why would they be so determined to get this in everyone? He says he believes it's an agenda of control or depopulation, and that depopulation may be may relate to fertility. If you go on Frontier Center, I've written an article about Gates, WHO, and abortion vaccines, and you can see that they have been researching these since the early 70s. And the previous attempts were in tetanus shots, where they would say it was for tetanus, except they were only administering it to females of childbearing years, and they were only administering it in high population areas where you know, high fertility areas, Africa or Latin America or Philippines or whatever, and then they would administer it again in 6 months. Okay, well, a tetanus shot is supposed to last 10 years, so what do you think is happening? I found in the research, there was a mention in Lancet, I think it was 1988, that when the vaccination clinics come through in Africa, the people hide in the bushes. That's how much they know that when the people in white coats show up from the UN or whoever it is, people are going to die from the shots one way or another. That's how that became their public reputation. Okay. Being safe, prepping, canning, harvesting, storing water, and stay unvaccinated safe. Yeah, well, in those respects, yes. Hey, I'm going to tell you, there's a couple indications, one spiritual, one not, about why a second pandemic at some point is coming. The one that we know from this natural world is Bill Gates. He says, I call this pandemic 1. Okay. Oh, yeah, and then he turns to his now estranged wife, and they'll learn next time, won't they, honey? Do you think this guy is really interested in your health? Do you think the man who's funding the WHO more than anyone except the United States itself is really interested in your health? No. He met with the billionaires. He met with Oprah Winfrey. He met with David Rockefeller Jr. He met with Edward and Edith Blythe. He met with, I'm missing some, but there was Warren Buffett was there. There was a combined wealth of 125 billion in that room, and he told them in 2009, and it was in, I think, the Irish Examiner or the Irish New Yorker, but there was a paper there. Actually, it's in my article at Frontier Center on the abortion vaccine. But he said that he convinced them that world overpopulation was the biggest problem, and that what needed to happen was that you would have a solution to that that would go around, that would circumvent political and religious barriers. So in other words, let's get around democracy, let's get around the fundamental religious beliefs and philosophies of people and skirt through that. Well, those are two institutions that you should probably respect, not try to circumvent. But anyway, there are people with enough money, influence, wealth, and power that want to have the world in their image and do that. So, okay, on the other side is the late John Paul Jackson, who was someone who heard from the Lord. He said there's going to be two pandemics, and he says one will be naught but fear. Does that remind you of anything? One will be naught but fear, but the second one will be serious. So this is the one that is more fear than reality. You can still look at the stats. You can still look, even this so-called Delta variant, which when they test people, do they know they're getting the Delta or the other ones? The Delta variant is actually apparently more contagious but less deadly. And the original one was not that deadly. The other thing they're finding is, well, and then Michael Yaden talked about it, the best, and it's been reconfirmed in Israel, the best, most enduring immunity is actually from the if you get COVID and recover from it. So the unvaccinated, either one or two things is going to happen. They're going to have the best they're going to get the disease, and they're going to get the best immunity as they recover from it, which odds are they will, very high odds. Or if they do fall sick in a more serious way, well, at the end of it, they'll still have the immunity. This is not this is a disease that is less deadly than the flu for those under 70 and slightly more deadly than the flu for those over 70. That's the reality of it. And the average age of people who are dying from it, at one point I'd heard it was 83.3. I've heard in Canada it's 86 now. So the average age of people dying from COVID is actually older than the average lifespan. I mean, we're all going to go of something sometime. This is a fire that will only burn the driest of tinder, okay? And you don't need to be a doctor. You just need to look at stats, okay? Did you hear that Andrew Scheer was a member of the Young Global Leaders WF with Rempel? I saw that list. I don't know if Scheer actually was. It's funny. There is a Facebook group out there that says something like Michelle Rempel is a globalist shill, or Klaus Schwab or something like that. If I got invited to a conference where I was going to meet with all the economic and political shakers of the whole world, I don't think I'd refuse it either. Maybe at this point I'd say I don't really care, but if you're a young person, I mean, it's not bad to necessarily to be meeting these people, okay? I mean, when Brad Wall stopped really it was him, when he stopped the takeover of Potash Corp, I mean, he got invited to Bilderberg. Did he go? Yeah. Jason Kenney's been there a couple times. I don't know if he was in it or not, but we don't always know what happens at these meetings, and we don't know. I have to think that at some point, when you look at how this has all gone down, that there is some kind of control structure that is going on in a way that is opaque to us, because there's no. I mean, you look at the Rockefeller document from 2010, Rockefeller Foundation, they call it the lockstep document, right? It was something like scenarios for global blah, blah, blah. But one of them had a pandemic scenario where China had a very strict lockdown, but all over the world it went, and in that scenario the Americans were really lax, and so it all went through. Of course, all these people were recommending that Trump, don't close the borders, don't do da 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 da, and he said no. The day after the UN declared it, they didn't call it a pandemic yet, but they had some other word for it. The very next day in January, I think it was January 31st of 2010, he shut the borders from China. Right? He says the ink was barely dry on a trade deal with China when this happened. And then we have Fauci saying in early 2017, mark my words, there will be a surprise pandemic in this presidency. How do you know there's going to be a surprise pandemic? The guy who invented the PCR test had the most scathing things to say about Dr. Fauci before he died in August of 2019. He said, Fauci doesn't know anything about anything. I will tell him that to his face. And he says, these people have an agenda. And he says, it's not the agenda that you or I would want, given that in some ways our tax dollars go to them for our health. He said, they have their own agenda. He says they make up their own rules as they go along. Well, that sounds really familiar. Okay. And if you can still find that Kary Mullis, Karymullis. You can find, if you go to BitChute and you type in that and Fauci, you'll probably find a video. BitChute.com, BITCHUTE, not a bitch that you shoot. No, BitChute. Look it up, because they are not interested in censorship. Neither is Rumble. If you want to know what's going on with coronavirus, you go to Laura Lynn, Tyler Thompson's channel on Rumble. She has the best guests, the best doctors. She goes over the news. She'll give you a little clip of what's happening lately. Fantastic show. Once in a while I get the privilege of being on it. And the things that you learn there that you don't hear anywhere else, you'll wonder where the mainstream media has been all this time. But you know, there's conformity. There's powers of conformity that come to our institutions, that come to where it's very political. I remember reading the book The Deniers, and it was by an environmentalist who was against nuclear power. And some years ago, he was having a conversation with some Chinese, and they said to him, you know, it's hard to find any people, any credible scientists that don't believe in climate change anymore, man-made cause and the whole thing. And he said, well, he says, based on my thing with nuclear, he says, I think there would be some. He says, you know, when it started with nuclear, you would not have any scientists be against nuclear, because nuclear was just going to be this great, big, wonderful scientific solution to everything, which, by the way, Patrick Moore very much believes in. And but he says, I learned from that there were some, and he says, eventually they got to a point where they made enough, you know, it became an acceptable opinion. So you have some scientists that are against nuclear, and there are some that are for it. But he said, okay, if you look at that, he said, I think with climate change that there is going to be, there's going to be some scientists that are against the consensus. Well, he found that it was actually the most eminent scientists that were against it. So the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that the UN has, the scientific document is always more measured than the press release and the political document that they put out. You know, a lot of the environmental movement was launched in 1968 at the Club of Rome because it was useful for their purposes and things they wanted to have happen. Because you can't have globalism if you don't have a problem that transcends borders. You don't have an excuse for the world nations to give up their sovereignty unless you have a problem that requires that they surrender it to deal with some global issue, right? So, okay, keep an eye on U.S. political information. Canada always follows. I am absolutely counting. I pray, occasionally I remember to do this, to pray that the evil gets exposed in the United States, because if you can expose the deep state there, that network, those tentacles go all over the world, and we will find out what's been going on. And I do think that's still going to happen. While people say peace and safety, destruction will come on them suddenly. You know, it's funny, one of the American founding fathers, might have been Jefferson, but he said the people that give up security for liberty, or liberty for security, will find in the end they have neither. Right? So there's something to remember. Do you think that we've become vicious enough to start door knocking? Rick? I'll tell you, if they do, we won't have much mourning. And I mean, they're doing it in the States, and they're also saying some of them are getting instructions to disregard things at the door, saying if you're knocking about this, don't. So yeah, they could do that. I think what happens is, and this is why we need to fight right now, is the longer this goes on, the less leverage we will have. The more the fear-mongering will continue, the more all of this will happen. And that's why we need to call it out right now. I cannot imagine if you take this jab against your better judgment, and let's say 2 years from now, this whole thing it's been exposed for what it is, and you think, why did I take that jab? I knew better. I held on for so long, but I wanted to keep this job, and da-da-da-da-da. Look, there's a mark of the beast coming where you can't buy or sell. I'm not taking that either. I don't know how I'm going to live. I know that my soul is safe in Jesus Christ. And what it says in the scriptures, Romans 10:9, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. So if you want to be saved, you just rewind that back, know what you have to do. If you mean it in your heart and you're telling God that and you give Jesus Christ your life, he has it and your soul is safe. And he said, do not fear those who kill the body, but him who can kill both your body and soul in hell. There's only one person who can do that. And that's what we need to remember. It also says if you take the mark of the beast, you cannot be saved. And that word for saved is sozo, and saved is your body, your soul, and your spirit. Revelation also says there's a time coming where men wish they could die, but they can't. You know, any immortality that comes on this earth that is apart from God is going to be a curse and not a blessing. So remember that. Okay, I agree with you. This is about depopulation. So demonic. Yeah. The financial reset is slow to happen, but it is starting also. Yes, you know, the evil people's timeline is already been denied in some ways, because in 1988 there was an issue of The Economist where the eagle is there. I have to think that symbolizes America in some way. But on its neck was a pennant, had the year 2018, and the headline was "The global currency is coming." Right? So they already planned that we would have a global currency by 2018. Well, they couldn't quite make it because they're not God. Apparently, I've been told there's no test for Delta variant. Have you heard different? No, I haven't. See, the PCR tests, which, again, they've already said that you have to have a different test by the end of December because it's not very good. So the authorities have already said this. Like, I can't remember if it was CDC or the WHO or what. But the PCR test is not very good. Now, first thing is, the PCR test will test for certain segments of the proteins of the thing. They will magnify. What they do is they'll magnify the genetic material. So this is another problem with these PCR tests. Okay, now the guy in Manitoba, and they had him on the stand because Justice Center put him on the stand, and the whole lab is actually named after him. But what they had happen there was this man said, "Look, I've been doing an experiment of my own," and he says, once you get past 25 cycles, you cannot make this virus work in a viral culture, which suggests to him that it's no longer alive. And so, so somewhere between 18 and 25 cycles that it stopped. You know, that was its maximum range of effectiveness. Anything beyond that was stupid. Well, Manitoba government was still asking him to do 36 cycles, right? Every cycle, they double that genetic material. It's not just like, oh, 27 is a little bit more than 26. No, 27 is twice as much as 26. 28 is twice as much as. So you can imagine how absolutely exponential, how much you have to magnify this thing by the time it's 40. Kerry Mullis said, when he was still alive, he said, you could find anything in anyone pretty much. You could have a single molecule, multiply it so much. He says, this test, he says, is not a good measure of whether someone is sick with a disease. You know, he said that while he lived. They could not have pulled this off while Kerry Mullis was still alive, because he would have absolutely ripped Fauci a new body part. He would have gone through him, as Patton said, like crap through a goose. So yeah, is there a test for the Delta variant? If there would be, what it would take is a very expensive lab test. Another problem that we have with the coronavirus itself, and that's why you know, when they talk about the guy in Alberta who was asking, do you have a sample of the virus? The way that the sequence for the coronavirus was made was they had some sequences from some samples of people who'd gone sick, and they put it into a supercomputer and came up, and the computer, using all available information, put something together that is what it would be. So even that's why when you see the how to use the PCR test instructions that were given out by I think it was the CDC, it has in there, it says we have no known sample of the virus. So what we've basically done is had the best proxies through what we have. So we did basically it says we're testing for the next closest thing that we have based on copyrighted things. So the problem with the copyrighted ones is they're all a corporate creation, because you're not supposed to be able to copyright something that occurs in nature. So they basically made a test based on that. So again, you start drilling this down, you can't just say, oh, you know, all the medical authorities done this, and if they all say this, then it's good. No, you look at the fine print, you realize this is so flimsy, if not false. It's sick. Who even knows if this broadcast is going to stay? The fact there's only, you know, not that many people watching is the only reason it's going to stay. Okay. I had COVID. I'm good now. Yeah, that's right. Okay. She was at a Bilderberg. Doesn't surprise me. One year I looked to see who was at Bilderberg, because they you know, people who are serving at the hotel or whatever, you know, they'll work on them to try to get the list out. There was 5 Canadians at one. I remember Kenny was at that one. There was someone from one of the book publishing companies there, and there were some others who were from the banks. Okay. There is an inner circle that Kenny will never be a part of. Control and depopulation. I was saying something right at some point. Do you think Trump knew how dangerous the vaccine is? He's still promoting it. No, I don't think he did. And, you know, this is probably going to be one of the most dangerous legacies. I think there's a couple things going on there. One of the things Trump says now, though, he says, no, I mean, don't force people to take it. Don't put in a vaccine passport. Don't make children take it, right? I mean, that's about all he can say, having worked so hard to promote it in the past. God bless us all. That's a good one. God do bless us all. None have been isolated, either being either or something else. Okay. My hour is up. God bless you all. Lord, keep our land glorious and free. Thanks for watching. Be strong, be brave, and ask God to keep you safe. You take care.